Shalom, shalom, Zion. This is Yahudia coming to you today, bringing an article from my site, shedding a little bit more light on the history of the American descendants of slaves today. So let's just jump right into this, elevating the consciousness in Zion, okay? Mysteries decoded. And we're just gonna first ask you to go over to the website and just follow along with the lesson, and it will be fairly easy for you to go back and reference the notes. Okay, here we are. The Tabernacle of David. Are Blacks in the Americas and Caribbeans descendants of King David? So this is one of those types of things that um, never been able to be proven until this year. A lot of revelations have come out, and we're just going to run through them. And after you watch this video, you make it to the end, and you will most likely be convinced that we've provided enough proof. So let's just jump right into this. Descendants of the transatlantic slave holocaust are suffering from cultural amnesia imposed upon them from their oppressors. The magnitude of damages done to the psyche of our people cannot be quantified without including its ramifications on the financial, medical, social, psychological, metaphysical, and spiritual realms. Everyone has their own way of dealing with this trauma, including, but not limited to, not dealing with it at all, otherwise known as cognitive dissonance. And I encountered this a lot when I first started coming across the historical proof of my identity. And if you remember from my first video, I was told that we were Israelites when I was like about 12 years old or somewhere around middle school. But back then there wasn't not enough historical proof to convince somebody outside of the Bible, but that was definitely a seed that was planted. And when I started coming across information, because that seed was already planted in me, I just, of course, I believed it because I felt it in my spirit. But a lot of our people aren't like that. I was really hurt and shocked when I started sharing this information, the kind of pushback I got. I just didn't understand it. Like, why wouldn't you want to believe something great about yourself? You're okay with just believing that you were random people with no history, that you was kind of like a step above an animal or a primal being running around in the jungle somewhere with no history. But it is what it is. So for years, Negro scholars have been accused of promoting myth as Black history. And I use that in quotes because a white scholar that was debating John Henry Clark about 30 years ago, he accused all of the scholars on a panel of doing that we like to say a lot of great things about ourselves without proof. And then no matter how much proof we show them, they pretty much discredit everything. But, you know, these sources that we have nowadays is way, way more than what they had back then. So they did the best they could with what they had. And, the generations following us is going to have even more information. So they accuse us of just making our history up, by accusing our Western oppressive civilizations of plotting to steal our history, for even suggesting that there was a plot by our oppressors to steal and hide our true history. We are accused of just making things up. But now there's so much information out there, they can't push that narrative, but instead label those who express this frustration about the oppressions of these vital records as promoters of hate and racism. And like a picture like this, they like to use it to demonize our men. They're just standing there with outfits. I mean, not traditional outfits, but they're not doing anything but standing there. And even if they are yelling, don't we have a right to be upset about what we went through? Why do they want this calm, sweet, smiley face Negro in their face all the time in order to, not feel, any type of guilt or frustration? I mean, I don't play into that. I just say we need to be what we are. If you feel like being angry, be angry. If you want to be cool and peaceful, be cool and peaceful. But we're not gonna like allow anybody to intimidate us into, you know, um, being docile. So, how can you steal and hide something so important from an oppressed people, then play the victim once it's exposed? They actually expect those of us who have this knowledge to sit down with them and have civil discourse. Israelites who refuse to join hand in hand with their oppressors and sing kumbaya are called dangerous radicals and hate groups. And that's what they love to do. They love labeling people. They have a label for everybody but themselves, right? How ironic is that? That's like breaking into somebody's house and accusing them of hate and intolerance for kicking you out and calling the cops. Better yet, it's like getting caught with someone's stolen property. Then, as the perpetrators of such crimes, expecting the victims to have you over for dinner to discuss the matter. Absolutely not. Reparations now, cut the check. I love the fact that our people are speaking up, requesting reparations, but we already know it's not going to happen. But it doesn't hurt to voice our concerns and push our agenda. Okay. So it's absurd and a complete insult to approach this conundrum with anything short of an honest apology and financial restitutions. Well, if they wanted to do right, they would give us financial restitution. They could start first with taxes, right? Why are we paying taxes? Or they can start with down payment assistance for American descendants of slaves, 20% down on any home you want, and zero interest home loans. That's what I would put in the contract for Black America. And I think they do have 0% interest home loans in there at least one time, one lifetime. So if they are unwilling to undo this evil, they should be prepared to be declared an enemy and stay the hell away from us, period. And that's where I'm at with it. I already know that going to have meetings with these heathens like Brother Ice Cube did is a waste of time. By him being a public figure, I guess he wanted to show effort, because he is important enough to be called for a meeting. He wanted to at least show effort that he's trying to communicate with them. But, at the end of the day, these heathens have killed and stolen for thousands of years to get where they're at, starting from the Greek Empire. So they're not going to just hand over their spoils over to us like that after a meeting. So now that I've gotten that all off my chest, let's discuss the matter of King David and his connections with the American descendant of slaves. So we're told, and let's get back to this American descendant slave, ADOS, #ADOS movement. That movement is a movement led by a specific person, but the phrase American descendant of slaves is something that I do like. I like that our specific concerns are being addressed in this movement because there are a lot of Black people in America now. Most of them are, the most successful ones are not even from here. They're coming from Africa. So when we plead for justice, we're talking about the people that were here first, the ones that built this country. We're not talking about immigrants that came afterwards. So I do like that about the so-called movement. As far as the leader go, I would probably say that there's probably some pretty selfish motives behind that, only because I'm just not going to just go there. Let's just say I like the movement, but he doesn't own the movement. So we got to be careful about who we choose to follow and just be diligent about the actual movement and not the leader. So moving on from that, we are told our entire lives that Black people were brought here as slaves from Africa. That was only a small portion of the truth. Yes, they were taken from Africa, but they had only recently arrived there after their exile from Spain and Portugal during the Inquisition. In addition, their children were taken away from them and were forced to convert to Roman Catholicism prior to their exile. So we have here a piece of evidence that most awakened Hebrews already know. If you haven't seen this evidence yet, I encourage you to look into it. If you want to purchase this book, you can have it for the price for about, I think, $60,000, or you can read it for free online at places like archive.org. And they take things like this out of print so that you can, you know what I mean, be in the dark about history. Even the copies that they sell on Amazon, they have removed the pages that talked about the Black Jews. So you have to be careful even about wasting your money buying the book. So if you want to see the original, you're gonna have to Google this title and the name of the author in Google, and it will take you to archives.org or harvard.org or any Princeton or anything, and you can read it online as a PDF for free. America being the latest and most accurate description of the New World by John Ogilvy, 1600 to 1676, page 574. It shows that the Black Jews were banished from Portugal and sent to work on the coast of West Africa, on the west coast of Africa. Who are these Black Jews? That's what the answer, we're going to have the answer to that question by the end of the video. So King John II in 1492 expelled all the Jews to the island of St. Thomas. And they're not talking about St. Thomas in the Caribbean. There's a little island off the coast of Guinea, I believe, in the west coast of Africa. There's a little island called St. Thomas. And that became a colony around 1471. So it says that the Jews was expelled to the island, which had been discovered in 1471, into other Portuguese settlements on the continent of Africa. And from these banished Jews, the Black Portuguese, as they are called, and the Jews of Luango, who are despised even by the very Negroes, are descendant. So they're basically saying that the people that were kicked out of Spain and kicked out of Portugal, rather, the Black Portuguese were, one, they were Black, two, they were Jews, three, they were sent to St. Thomas and other settlements on the mainland Africa. Luango, that's a place in Angola, and they're saying that all of the Jews that were sent into Africa were already pretty much related to the ones on the continent already. So they already know the connection between the tribes that were already in Africa and the Portuguese Jews that they brought over there. They already knew that they were relatives. So once they got over there, it's all saying that they were despised, even though they were related, because they had been separated. Those branches had been separated from one another for around 2,000 years. So you're talking about, you might as well say that they looked at them as strangers. They probably had a language barrier because the Hebrew on the continent of Africa had evolved to different dialects that was not fully identical to the ones of the Portuguese Jews that were brought over there. So a lot of barriers there. So this is a small one, and if it's not enough to convince you, let's take a look specifically who the Black Jews were. They were literally from the royal house of David. These heathens knew exactly what they were doing, and it was an organized effort, a confederation that conspired to keep this information hidden. And this, we have Psalms 83, verse 3 through 5. They have taken crafty counsel against your people and consulted against your hidden ones. They have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against you. Okay, like the Confederate Army and the Confederacy where we were slaves. They have been confederate against us for a long time. So let's cite some sources for the skeptics out here. Here we have the Jews of Spain and Portugal, which was oddly enough published on January 1st, 1865, the year the slaves were freed in America. See, they were talking about us all the way up until they set us free. And the passage states that the Jews of Spain were from the royal house of David, brought there by the king of Spain with the assistance of King Nebuchadnezzar. Even more Black Jews came after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. They resided in Seville and Grenada. So that's what that source cites. So let's read it right quick. So a philosopher named Thomas and King Alonso, whence we may learn, if we can believe it, that a king of Spain who had assisted Nebuchadnezzar in reducing Jerusalem brought an enormous population into Spain, all from either the family of David or at least from the tribe of Judah. And that the royal family resided first in Seville, then in Grenada, adding that the exiles afterward had their numbers greatly increased by the fugitives from the desolation of the Second Temple. And as you can see in the top right-hand corner, this was published on January 1st, 1865, The Jews of Spain and Portugal. So as you can see, they talk about us behind our back. They write history books behind our back, and then they turn around and call us liars if we tell them who we are. I believe that's a pretty demonic thing to do to a people. And no wonder a vast majority of our people suffer from some form of either personality disorder, anxiety disorder, or various forms of mental illness, because we have so many things, so many principalities and powers and rulers of the darkness of this world working against us. So therefore, we are afflicted with so many spirits. So here we have the names of the two branches from the house of David who resided in Spain. Two Israelite families were the Ibn Dawiz and the Abarbanels, who settled in the districts of Lucena, Toledo, and Seville. So reading this passage, it states, not content with the fact that the Jewish colony in Spain had possessed the right of citizenship long before the Visigoths and other Germanic tribes had set their tyrannous foot in the land, but desired to lay claim to an even higher antiquity for it. So what they're saying is that these Jewish colonies in Spain were irritating the locals by saying during this period of time that they had been there long before most of the citizens were, because they had gotten there around 500 BC. And they claim like basically like home court advantage over the Visigoth and Germanic tribes that came. So it almost makes you think that the king of Spain back in those days were not of the Caucasian race, because they say the Visigoths and Germanic tribes came after the Jews were brought from Israel by King Nebuchadnezzar. Okay. So it kind of makes you think that maybe those were just like some Canaanite tribes or some Phoenician tribes ruling over Spain. Because I do know from my history of studying ancient Phoenicia that Spain was like a major port city and drop-off point before they circle around to Africa and, you know, the rest of Europe in the north. So it appears that the Caucasian Spaniards did not come until way after this, the Black Jews were there. So moving on, it says the Spanish Jews maintained that they had been transported hither after the destruction of the temple by the Babylonian conqueror Nebuchadnezzar. Certain Jewish family, the Ibn Dawiz and Abarbanels, boasted descent from the royal house of David and maintained that their ancestors had been settled since time immemorial, partly in the district of Lucena and partly in the environs of Toledo and Seville. So there you go. Tells the cities where they settled in once they got there in Spain, and also tells you that they were there before the Visigoths and Germanic tribes got there. So it seems like that was a very melanated peninsula. Okay. All right. Next, we'll have a look at the work of Brother Benaiah Israel, discussing in his documentary series entitled Hidden Hebrews, King David Part 1, the Black History of Spain and Portugal is what's going to be discussed in this video. So we're going to be watching several clips, and then all of the clips are going to be around 5 minutes apiece. So just sit back, enjoy, or you can pause the video right now and come back. Okay.
After the fall of Jerusalem by both the Romans and the Babylonians, they both sent the sons of the house of Dawid to Spain. As the following references reads, and it reads, the Spanish Jews maintained that they had been transported hither after the destruction of the temple by the Babylonian conqueror Nebuchadnezzar. Certain Jewish families, the Ibn Dawids, or the sons of Dawid, and the Abarbanels, boasted the descent from the royal house of Dawid, and maintained that their ancestors had been settled since time immemorial, partly in the district of Lucena and partly in the environs of Toledo and Seville. The numerous Spanish Jewish family of Nasi also traced back its pedigree to King Dawid, and proved it by means of a genealogical table and seals. The family of the Ibn al-Balayas was more modest and dated its immigration only from the destruction of the Second Temple. A family tradition runs to the effect that the Roman governor of Spain begged the conqueror of Jerusalem to send him some noble families from the capital of Judea, and that Titus complied with his request. Among those thus transported was a man named Baruch, who excelled in the art of weaving curtains for the temple. This Baruch, who settled in Merida, was the ancestor of Ibn al-Balayas. And the next reference reads, Abarbanel, in his commentary on Zechariah 12, verse 7, reads, and Yah also shall save the tents of Judah, affirms that at the desolation of the first temple, two families of the house of Dawid came and settled in Spain, one at Lucena and the other, the Abarbanels, at Seville. And from these came 1,000 offshoots. Reference after reference confirms indeed that the sons of King Dawid were sent to Spain. As the following reference reads, and it reads, the Spanish Jews are the true descendants from the tribe of Judah and the royal house of Dawid, and were settled in Spain from the time of the captivity of the first temple by Nebuchadnezzar. And it's important to note that these Jews not only were the blood descendants of King Dawid, these Israelites also lived in the holy city of Jerusalem. In other words, they literally lived in the holiest city in the world. Their address?
Okay, we're gonna fast forward a little bit, because if you want to watch this entire documentary, feel free to click the link in the article. So we're gonna fast forward to about right here.
And the following reference reads, and it reads, Thus, the black color is found not only in individuals, as the black Jews of Portugal. And the next reference reads, and it reads, the Jews of Portugal are very dark. And the next reference reads, the brown Jews of Portugal and Spain. This reference reads, swarthy in Portugal and in Spain. And the next reference reads, and it reads, when we look around us in this great metropolis, and behold, amid the chosen people, the Hebrew nation, the descendants of Abraham, every variety of complexion, from the fair-haired, rosy, and ruddy-faced Englishman to the crisp, frizzled-haired, and dark and dusky countenance of the swarthy Negro. Now note that both the Jew and the Negro were referred to as swarthy. And now let's take a closer look at the hair texture of the Jews. For this, let's review the Lachish relief in the British Museum showing the Jews' hair from 701 BC.
So let's continue down the line. We've got more slaves that are leaving the city. Now somebody tell me the difference between this guy and this guy. Whose side do you think this guy's on? The Assyrians, yeah, the conquerors, the Assyrians. And whose side do you think this guy is on? The slave, yeah, the people from Israel or Lachish. You can tell also by their distinctive hairstyle depicted in archaeology. The slave, yeah, the people from Israel or Lachish. You can tell also by their distinctive hairstyle depicted in archaeology. The slave, yeah, the people from Israel or Lachish. You can tell also by their distinctive hairstyle depicted in archaeology.
And next, let's review the skulls of the Spanish and Portuguese Jews. The skulls of present-day Negroes are called dolichocephalic. And ironically, the skulls
So in
of
that
Spanish...
segment, we went over some proof that of the race of the Jews in Spain and Portugal, that they have been documented in several sources, including sources outside of this documentary, but just several sources that they were Black. So it's not like a, Middle Eastern or Arab look. It was definitely Negroes living there, or Black people, okay, who were Jews. So let's move on. And this next section is going to talk about the genetic proof that our people were definitely the ones that was living in Spain and Portugal that were referred to as Jews during the Inquisition. Okay. So the Inquisition was a race war, and the people that refer to themselves as Jews, they aren't. They are converted to the religion, and then they kind of twisted into something else that most of them are not even following the actual religion. They kind of branched off into something a little bit more Luciferian, but that's for another time. But we'll go ahead and just have a look at this clip. This is like a little 2-minute clip.
Tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. With that in mind, we cannot assume a person is a Jew just because they say they are. We need to prove it. And to do that, we need to use the Bible with DNA to find the truth. For example, the Bible tells us the 12 tribes of Israel shared a single forefather called Jacob, or Jacob, renamed Yisrael. The Bible also tells us that the children of Yisrael had 4 emas, or 4 mothers: Zilpah, Leah, Rachel, and Bilhah. In other words, the 12 tribes of Israel was made up of one father and 4 mothers. With that in mind, we can use DNA to see if the Negro has 1 forefather and 4 mothers. Now, DNA does indeed reveal that the Negro does share a single DNA forefather called E1B1A by geneticists. DNA also reveals that the so-called Negro shares 4 DNA mothers, referred to as L3, L2, L1, and L0 as well. Here we see the Negro's DNA matches the Bible perfectly. The Ashkenazi Jews, on the other hand, do not share a single forefather, nor do they share 4 DNA mothers. This further proves that the Negro are the true Jews. And yes, in references older than the 1900s, Jews are called Negroes.
Okay.
In short,
We're
when
gonna
reviewing
skip forward a little bit more to the right about right here. And this section is showing the Roman Catholic Church role in the Inquisition and everything. And it's going to go into some pretty horrific details. So just hang tight and please do watch it.
The descendants of the Jews from Jerusalem who lived in Spain were persecuted mercilessly, no matter if they accepted Christianity or not. Even when they embraced Christianity, they were slaughtered. As the following reference reads, and it reads, "Whereupon they dragged him by the hair from the church, killed him, and burnt his corpse. While one monk was inveighing from the pulpit, 2 other Dominicans sallied forth with crucifixes in their hands, exclaiming, 'Heresy! Heresy!' and offering 100 days of indulgence to every Christian who should kill a Jew or anyone who conformed to Judaism. They soon collected a mob, which was increased by a number of Dutch and Danish sailors who had landed from their vessels then lying in the Tagus. They slew and mangled their victims, casting many while yet living into the fires. The Negroes and the vilest rabble had kindled or burned at the church doors, to which they kept constantly adding fuel. Notice the Spanish and Portuguese Jews were called Negroes, and it was at the doors of the church that they stacked the bodies of Negroes, one on top of another. Some were still alive, and they set them on fire. They burned the sons of Jerusalem and the sons of King Dawid. This is just one of many persecutions which befell the sons of Dawid. However, these heathens would further the affliction, and this would eventually lead to their downfall. The book of Zechariah, chapter 1, verse 15 reads, "And I am very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease, for I was but a little displeased, and they helped further the affliction." If you're wondering who would dare persecute the sons of King Dawid, well, we need look no further than Yisrael's greatest enemy, of all times. The people in the Bible destined to be destroyed by Hamashiach himself, Esau. Esau, along with Gog and Magog, persecuted the descendants of King Dawid. And to find Esau today, look for people who have a perpetual hatred for the Most High Yah and his people. Look for a people who have a habit of killing the Most High Yah's chosen people over and over again. It's a people who would choke an innocent man to death just for the joy of it. It's a people who would shoot a young man of King Dawid over a can of iced tea and a bag of Skittles. Confused? Well, if you don't know who the Most High Yah's people are, then you won't be able to find Israel's greatest enemy in the Bible today. Here's a hint. During the times of old, they had red hair. Before we track the sons of King Dawid as they made their way into Africa, there are a few things you need to know. You need to know that the city of Seville, Spain, was originally called Ishbiliya. Notice the city has the name of Yah at the end of the name. This city with the Most High Yah's name in it had the sons of King Dawid in it. Now remember, the city of Dawid in Jerusalem was the place that the Most High Yah chose to put his name. It is in this place that we see persecution break out against the sons of King Dawid. For example, in Seville, Spain, the city previously called Ishbiliya, the hometown of King Dawid's descendants, we see the Spanish Inquisition start in Seville. And it reads, "It's tempting to trace some of the fervor of Holy Week back to the fanaticism of the Spanish Inquisition, which was founded in Seville in 1481. The Holy Office was set up with Rome's approval to resolve the problem of Jews who had been baptized Catholics, but who continued secretly to practice their own faith." Now, remember, when the sons of King Dawid were brought to Spain, they were first brought to the city of Seville. As the following reference reads, it reads, "In the 13th century, between a philosopher named Thomas and King Alonso, whence we may learn, if we can believe it, that a king of Spain, who had assisted Nebuchadnezzar in reducing Jerusalem, brought an enormous population into Spain, all from either the family of Dawid or at least from the tribe of Judah, and that the royal family resided first in Seville, then in Granada, adding that the exiles afterwards had their numbers greatly increased by fugitives from the desolation of the Second Temple." And so the brews were brought to Seville. The Spanish Inquisition was started in Seville, The headquarters of the Spanish Inquisition was located in Seville. The first people to be burned and put to death at church by the Spanish Inquisition on Sunday was also in Seville. Not only that, after the Pope authorized Portugal to start the transatlantic slave trade, Spain issued contracts to govern the slave trade from Seville, the hometown of King Dawood's sons. As the following reference reads, and it reads, "What made the contract very much sought after was the ever-increasing demand for slaves in the Spanish Indies. Most of the slaves imported into Mexico and Central America during the 16th and early 17th centuries were from the Upper Guinea coast. It was this which was responsible for the extensive development of the Spanish practice of granting registers or individual licenses to ships engaged in the slave trade. These licenses issued in Seville." In short, Seville was ground zero to the transatlantic slave trade and the Inquisition. The Bruza in Seville and other places in Spain and Portugal were continuously persecuted. King Dawood's sons were given choices: to renounce the laws, which included the Talmud, and accept Christianity, leave the country, face torture, enslavement, and possibly death. Many of the sons of King Dawood chose to leave their valuable lands and wealth rather than to accept Roman Christianity. Some would rather kill themselves and their children instead of becoming a Roman Christian. Those who did become Christians were later persecuted, tortured, killed, or expelled by the Inquisition. In other words, they didn't have a choice. There was a prophecy these sons of Jerusalem had to fulfill. And with that said, many of the sons of King Dawood were sent to Africa.
Okay, so that was a pretty long 10-minute clip. I just had to play the whole section because that was a lot of information right there I didn't want you to miss out on. And we're going to fast forward to the end for like a little 1.5 minute clip.
Writer after writer constantly.
And this portion is also about the Inquisition. So we're going to continue how everything exploded, how the Inquisition happened and they were kicked out into West Africa.
Associated these Jews to King Dawood. As the following reference reads, and it reads, "Notwithstanding, it appears that until the expulsion, the Jews were not all molested by the Inquisition. For Abarbanel, who shortly after its establishment went to Castile, states that he was astonished at the power of the Castilian Hebrews and the grandeur of the law, and applied to them the verse of Dawood, 'Their thrones of judgment are set, thrones for the house of Dawood.'" Now, keep in mind, the sons of King Dawood, which fled into Africa, did so primarily in 4 ways. The first way, some fled directly into Africa from Spain in 1492. Writers spoke of the many ships which stood ready to transport the sons of King Dawood from Spain to Africa. In fact, the following reference speaks of the great numbers of Spanish royal Jews in Africa. And it reads, "The northern coast of Africa and the inhabitable region inland were full of Jews of Spanish descent. They had congregated there in great numbers during the century from the persecution of 1391 to their total expulsion." The second way the sons of King Dawood migrated into Africa was by way of Portugal expulsion edicts. In other words, Portugal told the Jews to get out, and even took the children of the sons of King Dawood and sent them into Africa. We even have letters written by the children themselves, which shows that they were eventually made slaves.
Okay, so pretty disturbing information. I mean, it's truth. Feel free to look it up. And also feel free to visit Brother Benaiah Israel's website. I do believe it is www.benaiah4israel.com. And he has the links to the online sources for all of his documentaries on there. And most of the whole awakenings sources is pretty much pulled from like the few brothers that was able to trigger this like cascade of information, and he's the one of the main, basically the a historian of the awakening. So moving right along, we're going to go over some more information about the prophecies about the house of David. And it's really important to, for one, understand the spiritual implication of this information through the Bible. I know, a lot of our people nowadays, they dibbling and dabbling in all kinds of stuff, and the Bible is the last thing that they want to read. But, you know, if you become triggered to read the Bible due to your interest in your own history, you're definitely going to walk away with a lot. And some of what you walk away with will hopefully move your spirit to make you a better person, because that's what it's really all about. Knowledge is one thing, but, it's nothing like, waking up knowing how loved you are by the Creator. And the more you read and you study, the more you start to see things come together. So here we are. This is just a little slide that I did for a Feast of Tabernacle lesson that I created for. So I inserted this in here because it really does kind of apply to the house of David prophecies. So we have here Ezekiel 17, verse 3 through 8. And it reads, "And say, Thus says Adonai Yahuwah, a great eagle with great wings, long winged, full of feathers, which had diverse colors, came unto Lebanon and took the highest branch of the cedar." So we're going to pause right there. The highest branch of the cedar. Hebrews, they speak a lot in code. And when they talk about trees and cedars and stuff like that, they're not necessarily talking about a tree outside. They're talking about a family tree. And they use the cedar for this verse because that is what they saw is the strongest tree. And when they said they took the highest branch, it's saying that they took the most highest branch of this family tree. And if you know anything about Hebrew history, there's nothing higher than the branch of King David, because that's the lineage that was used to bring the Messiah into the world. So David's children were always seen as a royal family and the highest branch, and the rightful kings and queens of the rightful royalty of the entire house of Israel. So anyway, so it's saying that this great eagle, he cropped off the top of his young twigs and carried into a land of traffic. So they're saying that this great eagle, think about it, all of the heathen nations, they love eagle symbolism. So they're saying this big eagle swooped in and clipped off the highest branch of the cedar, right? And brought it into a land of traffic. Most of the slave trade began in cities where on the coast, where they do a lot of trade and commerce and stuff, right? Because that's where the slaves have to come in. And so they were brought into a land of basically commerce. And he set it in a city of merchants. There you go. So he took also of the seed of the land and planted in a fruitful field. So he said, like, although these heathens snatched us away, the Most High put us in a place that we can grow and multiply. Like we always are able to survive and thrive no matter where he puts us, because we're so resourceful, and we actually build countries up for these heathens, exactly how they did with us in America. We never really able to get the entire fruit of the labor, but we do survive, and we are very strong, and we are very, we're very good at multiplying. We will say that. Anyway, he placed it by great waters and set it as a willow tree We're going to have a look at the willow tree as well. But anyway, and it grew and became a spreading vine of low stature. So they said we grew, but we always stayed on the bottom, right? Whose branches turned towards him, and his roots thereof were under him. So even though that we are of low stature, we always have our people always, since they don't know their history, reaching for the eagle. That's a lot what we're going on right now. A lot of people are reaching for the eagle with this election, right? So it became a vine and brought forth branches and shot forth sprigs. There was also another great eagle with great wings and many feathers. And behold, this vine did bend her roots towards him and shot forth her branches towards him, that he might water it by the furrows of her plantation. And it was planted in a good soil by great waters, and it might bring forth branches, and it might bear fruit, and might be a goodly vine. So this is a very loaded scripture reference, but we're gonna focus on a few words, because like this passage alone can turn into a whole 2 to 3 hour video if you completely break it down. So I try to hit the highlights and keep it moving so I don't overload people with information. So here we have the crest of a city in Portugal where the Hebrews were living, the Israelites, the house of David, and it was called Eidos Negros. Okay, so Eidos Negros is the name of the ancient city, and it means like the city of the two Negroes. Like A is an abbreviation for Aldeos, which is like means like village, and dos means two in Spanish and Portuguese, and Negroes means black. So it's like the village of the two black families, right? So remember earlier in the lesson, we were talking about how the two main families from the house of David settled in Spain. So here's our proof right here with this crest, and you can easily Google it, Eidos Negros, Portugal. And it also has vines and branches. You notice the vines and the branches on the seal. And as you can see in this passage here, it's talks about vines and branches a lot, right? So even more proof of who we are. And so we have here the ancient Hebrew word Zamareth. So ancient Hebrew letters are read from right to left, and this is the pictographic Hebrew that was initially used in the scriptures. The alphabet was changed over the years, probably because they didn't want the heathens to be able to translate it, because like the pictographic Hebrew, you can discern the meaning of the words just by looking at the letters and the meaning of the letters. And they probably just, after so many captivities, after that Babylonian captivity, just kind of switched up their script so that it would have to be translated rather than just discern from the pictograph. That's what I discern happened. And there might have been other reasons, but anyway. So the first letter on the right is the Tzad, the Zod, the Zion. We got the Mem, and we got the Resh, and we got the Tal. So we got Zamarath, okay? So we have here a opportunity with to discern this Tzad, Mem, Resh, and Tef. I think I said Zion. I didn't mean to say Zion. That's a whole different other letter, but it's the Tzad, like a TS sound, Tzad. Or you could just say a Z just to make it easier. The second letter is a Mem, which is like waves of water, representing chaos and also spirit, life, okay? And we got the head of a man, which is a Resh. And then we got the top, which is a cross, which is supposed to be two cross sticks symbolizing covenant. And it also have a numerical value of 400 because the covenant is tied into the number 400 because of the 400-year prophecy of our redemption. So Zamarath means top of the tree, and its root word is Zamar, which means wool and woolen. Hiding in the unknown spirit realm, the woolen-headed strong leader makes a covenant. That's what it translates out when you look at the pictograph. So that's pretty deep. It's letting you know that the highest branch in verse 3 is talking about a woolly headed person. So it's all encoded in there who this Bible is about. So Ados Negroes is an ancient Hebrew town in Portugal that was settled by two Negro Israelite families during the captivity in Babylon. If you notice the vine and the branches on the coat of arms, you would definitely know that this scripture is in reference to them. And it's other scriptures I didn't include because this article is long enough. But there's a scripture where the Messiah talks about, I'm the vine, you're the branches, I'm the vine. And if you just look through the Bible, you'll see those vine and branch references. So undeniable clues was left to us to trace our roots. So the heathen nations, symbolized by the eagle, took the highest branch, the royal house of David, and placed them in their land of traffic, cities of merchants as valuable merchandise. See, because they know we're valuable, like they want to say that, oh, Black people don't do nothing, blah, 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 but they have always been chasing us around the world trying to use us for stuff because we're inventors. We're the one who's triggered a lot of the inventions that are used today. Our people are very resourceful and they know that. So they ended up on the Iberian Peninsula because the king of Spain begged the king of Babylon to send some talented Israelite captives to build up his kingdom. Human trafficking began and will end with the exploitation of the Negro. So they always trafficked us. They always look to conquer us so they can like sell us around. Like they've been doing this a long time. They've been doing this a very long time. And they've only been able to do this when we become disobedient. So eventually our people are going to have to learn their lessons with that. But after we're redeemed, there will be no more trafficking, okay? Everybody that's left on this planet will be the righteous ones. And the only one that's going to be left to be servants are the descendants of these heathens, okay? So the highest branch in Ezekiel 17 translate as the top of the tree, but the root word is wool or woolen. So it depicts the highest branch as being woolly haired. There's only one people who can be described as being woolly haired people, and that would be Negroes. Once they were exiled to Africa, again, they were forced to convert to Roman Catholicism. And were from that point no longer referred to as Black Jews, but Lancados. They were sent to lands that were acquired by the Spanish and Portuguese on the west coast of Africa. They were constantly running away and blending in with African locals. They were able to blend in so easily because although some of them were mulatto skin, most of them were just as Black as the Africans. So we'll have a look there. We have an excerpt from Africa and the Discovery of the Americas, page 110, by Leo Weiner, published 1920. So they're making all these books about us behind our back and not telling us anything. That's what kills me. And they're probably making books. No, they're not probably. They are books right now about us and our history and not telling us. And then if you go on TV or any kind of platform, well, then they'll call us crazy or hateful for saying something like this. Look at what they did to Nick Cannon. And I don't know, maybe he was a bit of a novice. I would have pulled several receipts before I bowed down to that heathen. But who's to say that he didn't get his family's lives threatened or something? I don't know, because I mean, nobody can sit down with me and tell me something crazy like that. But anyway, especially if I read it with my own two eyes. So this passage states that the Lancados were also called Portingales because they were exiles from Portugal. This is in west coast of Africa, what he's referring to in this passage. And they dwelled amongst the Mandingo tribes of Guinea. Again, they are described as being, for the most part, Black, with some being light-skinned, similar to the way it is now in America, I guess. So Joseph describes these Lancados. I'm reading from the passage right there, right from the top. Under the name of Portingales, I must break off from a while from them and acquaint you first with another sort of people we find dwelling, or rather lurking, amongst these Mandingos, only some certain way up the river. So they're saying these Portingales was dwelling amongst the Mandingos. And these are, as they call themselves, Portingales, and some few of them seem the same. Like they seem like the same type of people, is what he's trying to say. Others of them are mulattoes between the black and white, but for the most part, they were black and as the natural inhabitants. So they say even though some of them was kind of like light skinned, most of them were black. So they are scattered, some 2 or 3 dwellers in one place, and they are all married, or rather keep with them or rather keep with them the country's black women, of whom they begat children, howbeit they have amongst them neither church nor friar nor any religious order. It doth manifest appear that they are such as have been banished or fled away from forth either of Portugal or the isles belonging unto the government. They do generally employ themselves in buying such commodities as the country afford. Okay, so that's an interesting passage that tells the absolute truth about that these black people that was living in west coast of Africa amongst the Mandingos were from Portugal. They was kind of scattered and disorganized, and they didn't really have a religious order, and these were the ones that didn't get caught. Okay, so that just goes to show how many of our people were cast out, because even though a lot of people, black Jews were in Spain and Portugal, they also leading up to that point had they were all throughout Europe. So the crafty council of these heathens began expelling us from all over the place, because slowly over the years, a lot of them had started moving into, like Great Britain and, Germany. A lot of the Germans were actually black, and a lot of the places in Europe had like predominantly black populations. The white people were like very, very much a minority in Europe. It wasn't until they kicked us out of Europe that it became a white country. So, and they're pretty much afraid that now that immigration is getting out of hand, that it's going to go back to the way it was, because Africans are definitely moving into Europe in mega proportions. So this passage is just basically, that passage was basically letting us know that the Lancados, the Spanish Jews that was forced into Christianity, were also called Portugales because they were exiles from Portugal and they dwelt amongst the Mandingo. Okay, so here we have is some very interesting information. This is the translation of the law written in 1518 by King Manuel I of Portugal, where he was ordering that the Lancados, who were Portuguese Black Israelite exiles, to be rounded up by African kings who were to receive payment for their service. Keep in mind that the Black Jews were just expelled in 1492, which means most of them were only in West Africa for 26 years before being sent to slavery in the Americas and Caribbean. At least that was the beginning of them being sent. Because you got to remember, even to this day, they still have tribes over there in Africa, which means not all of them were caught over the course of those few hundred years of the transatlantic slave trade. So, and they stopped sending them like in the beginning of the 18th century. So there was around 300 years of trafficking that brought about the millions that got here. But anyway, 26 years is not a long time. So the Portuguese Jews was barely there for 26 years. So no wonder the African kings were so quick to sell them off. I mean, it seems as though these Black Portuguese did not really have any allies because they were just too new. And you know how people are about their country, they don't like immigrants being in their country. So you offer them some money to round them up and send them away, they're going to take it because they don't look at them as being the same. They were like literally a bunch of, Black and mulattoes who spoke a whole different language. They spoke Portuguese and they spoke a version of Hebrew that they definitely could not understand at that point, because these two population of Israelites, most of the West Africans that were already there was from the Northern Kingdom. Okay, so they had been there since like even before the Babylonian captivity. They was there since like 700 BC or so. So they definitely didn't look at them as the same people. Okay. So they had no loyalty to these new strangers. King Manuel was upset at how their plans were failing to use the Lancados as agents to translate between the Spanish and the Portuguese and the African slaves. Okay, they was only able to translate because the Portuguese Jews spoke Hebrew, and a lot of the West Coast African dialects were various dialects of Hebrew, the Bantu's language, and so they was treated as fugitives. So basically, the Inquisition continued in Africa with the help of the African kings. So again, I say without an ounce of doubt that the agenda to suppress history of Black Americans was indeed a satanic plot to destroy and rewrite history. Once you know who controls the public school curriculum, which is like the elites, the ones who made all these things come to pass, you'll understand whose interests specifically these lies were spread. And so a lot of the descendants of these kings and these popes and all this other top bloodline, serpent bloodline families, not the regular everyday white person, but I'm talking about the elite whose family's lineage they have can be traced all the way back to the Edomites that was ruling alongside the Romans in Judea when the Messiah was crucified. These same people are descendants also of the Greeks who also invaded Jerusalem, okay, and overthrew and took over the temple until they were overthrown by the Maccabees, okay? So these people are the descendants of, a combination of Edomites and the house of Javan, of the house of Japheth. So these people only turned a different color because they were mating with certain tribes that were not 100% human, aka Neanderthals. Okay, so we're gonna have to just understand that there's certain things about history that are documented, and you're just gonna have to believe it. So here's another video from Benaiah Israel entitled Hidden Hebrews, King David Part 2. This video covers more about the Negro House of David as well as King Manuel's law to capture the Black Jews in Africa. So very powerful documentary, which is, and it's not really that long of a documentary, but there's so much in there that has been revealed that must be known, so we could receive deliverance in our true history. So here we are. The first section that we're going to go over is going to be talking about that city, Eidos Negros, where that royal, that city seal that we saw earlier. And then the other sections are going to be talking about a royal family in the country that was highly respected and regarded once they got there. Okay. So here we are, and this is going to be about a 5-minute clip, just in case you're wondering.
Many institutions fail to read a single decree by the King of Portugal and Spain, which is why this YouTube video, of all things, is more accurate, more factual than the pseudo-history taught in institutions of higher learning. In this video, we will do something for the first time in modern history in regards to the history of the Negro. We will read the laws and decrees of the kings and queens to see who they said they enslaved and to see what they said to do with them. To begin our journey, we'll go back in time to Portugal and Spain, to the year 1055 AD. So in roughly 1055 AD, there was a Jew born by the name of Yahya. Now, Yahya flourished in the 11th century in Portugal. An important note about Yahya is that Yahya was a descendant of the house of King Dawid. He was a son of King Solomon himself. We can find references regarding Yahya's history in the Jewish Encyclopedia and other historical documents. The following reference shows each of Yahya's forefathers all the way back to King Dawid. Like Dawid, Yahya was a beast on the battlefield. The Bible says in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 7, and it reads, "And the women answered one another and played and said, Saul has slain his thousands, and Dawid his 10,000s. So in the 11th century, Yahya teamed up with King Alfonso of Portugal against the Moors. And after defeating the Moors, the king of Portugal honored Yahya by giving him a territory called Aldeias dos Negros, or Village of the Negroes. And most importantly, he changed his name to Negro. And the following reference reads, and it reads, Yahya flourished in Lisbon in the 11th century, died about 1150 AD. He was held in high esteem among the Jews, and King Alfonso I honored him for his courage. After the conquest of Cimtarim, the king presented him with 2 country houses that had belonged to the Moors, wherefore he assumed the name Negro. And the next reference reads, and it reads, Yahya bin Rabbi was presented by Alfonso with a Moorish village and became known as Lord Aldea dos Negros, or Lord of the Village of the Negroes, or Dam Yahya of Negro. His son Yahya bin Yaish was born in Cordoba in 1110 or 1115. He also served Alfonso and was designated by the king as the first chief rabbi of Portugal, with his headquarters in Lisbon. And so the Yahyas became known as the Negroes, and they lived in a place called the Village of the Negroes. Now, keep in mind, these Negroes worked directly for the king of Portugal and Spain. In fact, they were placed as rulers over their brothers and sisters of Judah. They became the chief rabbis, royal tax collectors, and governors. It was because of their position and their deeds that the Yahya Negroes became famous throughout all of Spain, Portugal, Turkey, and Italy. They were prominent and renowned. As the following reference reads, and it reads, Dam Yahya Yaish, ancestor of the widely branching Yahya family, also tolerant, likewise Sancho's son, Alfonso II, who employed the Jews as farmers of taxes and as tax collectors. And the next reference reads, and it reads, he thereupon entered the service of Henry of Castile, who made him the head of the Jewish communities of his realm. Over the years, the king of Spain and Portugal fought each other over control of these famous Negroes. As the following reference reads, and reads, after the death of the king, Leonor deposed Dom Judah and the Jewish collector of customs at Lisbon on the representations of the city deputies. But when she wished to have her daughter Beatrice and the latter's husband, John I of Castile, recognized as regents of the country, the people rebelled, killed Leonor's favorites, and proclaimed John vice-regent of the kingdom. Leonor fled, accompanied by her confidants, the above-mentioned Dom Judah and the wealthy Dom Dawid Negro Yahya. Disputes between her and John I of Castile, who waged war against Portugal, ended in an open breach on the occasion of the nomination to the head rabbinate of Castile. Leonor demanded the place for her favorite, Dom Judah, but the king, at the desire of his wife, appointed Dom Dawid Negro Yahya. Embittered by this, Leonor plotted against the life of her son-in-law. but her plan was frustrated by Dom Dawid Negro, and Leonore was banished to a convent in Tordesillas, and the life of Dom Judah was spared on the plea of Dom Dawid Negro. Now, notice how the word Negro and Yah are used interchangeably. Yah was synonymous with Negro. As the following reference reads, and it reads, Dawid and Judah, Negro. Or the next reference reads, Solomon ibn Yah, Negro. It's fair to say everyone knew of the Negroes. In fact, if you were to board a time machine and go back to Spain and Portugal in the 1300s and 1400s and ask to see the Negroes, more than likely they would point you to a people with the last name of Negro who lived in the village of the Negroes and who looked like the modern day Negroes of today. And now,
Okay, so as you can see, there's a lot of information right there, and you can just go to the website to find this link to this video. Okay, that's why I set it up like this to make it really easy for you to find and have your references on hand all the time. So right now, we're gonna skip towards the end because you can watch this entire documentary on your own, and I just want you to just kind of see this law that was enacted to round up all of the Black Jews in West Africa. Okay, so here we are. Very legendary information.
word that would change the world as we know it forever. First, King Manuel changed the trade policy for West Africa. Instead of using lancados to conduct the trade, he switched to something else. And as a result, he no longer needed the lancados. In fact, it meant that they were in the way. As the following reference reads, and it reads, things changed under King Manuel I. At the beginning of his reign, King Manuel did not lease trading rights with Gambia to Portuguese merchants or lancados, as he did with the rivers of Guinea and Sierra Leone. And so once King Emmanuel changed the way he made his money, he no longer needed the brews. In fact, they were in the way. And so on March 15th, 1518, the year the first slaves were shipped directly from Africa to America, he sent Bernardino Gomez to orchestrate a massive manhunt of lancados. And he used the newly created law of King Manuel to do it. As the following reference reads, and it reads, King Manuel also had further threats in store for those lancados who were already on the coast in large numbers. On the 15th of March, 1518, he commissioned Bernardino Gomez to sail to Guinea to superintend the removal of the lancados. And the next reference reads, and it reads, the crown at first encouraged the policy of having lancados in this region to facilitate commerce. Degradados sailed on the voyages of both Vasco da Gama and Pedro Alvarez Cabral. Da Gama took 12 degradados with him and probably several in Southeast Africa. Once in place, it became clear that the Portuguese crown was unable to control them. In an effort to keep these regions free of non-Portuguese commercial activities, in 1518, the crown reversed the policy of creating lancados and attempted to round them up. And the following reference reads, and it reads, finally, on March the 15th, 1518, he published a violent charter for which he sent a special ship commanded by Bernardino Gomez to the ports of Guinea with the mission of getting all the Christian lancados who were there to board. Those who returned to Europe, obeying this order, would be forgiven as long as they paid the 10 cruzados along with half of their possessions or their farms. Those, however, who refused to embark and to leave the lands of Africa would be handed over to the African kings to be killed. The permit authorized Captain Bernardem Gomez to offer to the indigenous chiefs all the gifts that were necessary to achieve the delivery or the murder of those lancados. It seems that these violent measures by Monarch Venturoso were intended to reach Jews and foreign adventurers who spread freely along the African coast. And so the law that was written just a few years before against the lancados was now fully enforced, and a worldwide decree was given to all of Portugal's allies in Africa and abroad. And the message was clear. Go, hunt them down, and bring them to me, no matter where they are or how long it's been. Find them. I hereby authorize everyone to hunt them, to take all their possessions. You have my permission. You can keep half of their possessions. Just bring the other half to me. And bring them to me in chains. Bring them to the judges of Guinea as prisoners. And to all those looking for slaves, you can now purchase them from Africa, from the judges of Guinea, for they are now under the judgment of natural death. That was a summary and a paraphrase of a law that's roughly 20 pages long. And with that being said, let's take a closer look at this law issued by King Manuel, who started the transatlantic slave trade and also started it from Africa. This is the law that's never taught in any institutions of learning. A copy of this law can be found in Portugal's National Library. And you can check the description of this video for a link of your very own copy of a non-translated copy. Now, this document is written in ancient Portuguese, which doesn't translate well in Google Translate. So with that being said, we were blessed to have the help of a kind, helpful sister, Ema, professor, perfectionist, along with a professional translation company to review and certify these translations. And with that said, here are a few important excerpts from our translations. First, the law starts by stating the people of whom it is for. Researchers agree this law was written specifically for lancados. We see this in books from the 1900s. We also note that this law describes the targeted people as being those sent and those who go to Guinea. This lines up with the groups of King Dawood's sons that we reviewed earlier in this video. Some were sent by way of the expulsion edicts, and some fled on their own. Those are the ones who go to Guinea without the king's consent. So hopefully you can see this is just one big story that started in Spain and Portugal and made its way into Africa. As the following reference reads, and it reads, regarding those who are sent to Elmina or those who go to Guinea without the permission from the king, as well as those who do not comply with the rules. Here's a copy of the notes from one of our translators. These points have been validated using additional books and references. And it says, the fifth book is about the punishments or the ordinances for those that, one, went to Guinea with the consent of the king, but didn't keep his rules. Main crimes against the kingdom. They didn't keep the Catholic faith, they didn't pay taxes, or they had multiple wives. Point two, those that were sent to Guinea as punishment for not converting to the Catholic faith, so they couldn't go back by their own will. They were required good behavior, but they would often incur the same crimes. Reparations were paid to the kingdom in silver, gold, merchandise, and labor. The law then goes on to summarize the reason for the law, and it reads, the ordinations and the laws which have thus far been created for things related to our town, Elmina, and for things related to Guinea, are not going well and are not being declared like they should. Therefore, our service needs to step up and help preserve the enforcement of laws, since we are suffering quite a bit. If we take action, such attitude will be useful to all our kingdoms and all the governors and landlords, and also help with the excommunications that have been going on in many kingdoms. However, many laws have not even been created or confirmed yet. This situation is generating a lot of confusion and questions. We need to show that we have the ability to govern properly. The laws that talk about our mind and what we managed to take away from Guinea were idealized by my uncle, King Alfonso, as well as my cousin, King John. Something which they should take a lot of credit for. In the following paragraph, we will write what the law must be. The law basically states that these people could not buy or sell in West Africa without first having written permission from Portugal. And if the Lancados or sons of King Dawid broke this law, the sentence involved turning over the lawbreakers to the Portuguese judges and being sentenced to natural death, aka slavery. As the following reference reads, and it reads, by law, we are ordering all people not to go out of our ships or go to other lands and seas or places that we have conquered, with the objective of waging war or stealing things in our name. Such things should not be done without our permission. The person who does this shall be killed as punishment, which is natural death and slavery. The person who does this can also lose all their belongings and goods. This punishment also goes to all those people who attempt to steal things from our ships, like machinery, mechanical parts, or artillery. Those who are found wandering around other seas shall face the consequences. However, those who were found but have not done anything wrong shall be spared. We need to know all the information we can about the occurrences so we can order the correct punishment to be applied or not. And by this law of ours, we give place and license to all captains, pilots, masters, or landlords of our ships, or our keepers, or any other person of our kingdom, or landlords that those parts for their privilege or by our permission they go. We here state the permission to go to those places, and every ship, land, seas that they find, they are allowed to take them and bring all the people they find as prisoners. And as a message to those who defile us will be delivered to our judge of Guinea, which is the west coast of Africa. And by him be judged. Half of what they had will be divided by those who brought them, and the other half will be ours. And last but not least, the same law that authorized the taking of these people also authorized for the first time the taking of slaves from the west coast of Africa. As the following reference reads, and it reads, we are also certified to give permission to the captains of our ships and to order them to go to Elmina
or to Sao Tome.
and to Principe Islands to trade and to negotiate. However, a trip to Sao Tome and Principe Islands should be taken when it is really necessary. There, our ships might have the possibility of buying many slaves to bring to our kingdoms, as well as other things that can be purchased. Ladies and gentlemen, this law written by the King of Portugal is the actual law that started the transatlantic slave trade from Africa to the Americas. It is a law written specifically for Lancados, who are Black Portuguese, who are Spanish Jews, who are Negroes, who are the sons of King Dawid. For the first time in modern history, we have uncovered the greatest secret of the transatlantic slave trade.
All right, everyone. So there you are. I mean, it's really disturbing, and it's crazy that they were able to keep this a secret, but it's not unbelievable because our people wasn't even allowed to read. So it was actually quite easy to hide things from people that were not allowed to read. And once we were allowed to read, we've been dealing with so much racism and oppression. Not many of us have been able to dig deep enough and to try to figure out what happened to us. We've had scholars, but without the internet, it's like it was nearly impossible to make this many connections in one generation. So, shout out to all of the scholars who are no longer with us. They did the best they could with what they had, but it was gonna be fulfilled. That knowledge was gonna increase in the last days, and the internet helped bring that prophecy to pass. So here we are. At this point, I am going to stop the video, and I'm going to pick up in part 2 of this series, discussing the biblical prophecies in regarding the house of David. So thank you if you made it to the end, hanging with us tonight or today or whatever time of the day that you're watching this. But just know that I've laid out the case for the Americans' descendants of slaves being from the royal seed of David. So next time we're going to get on with the biblical prophecies about the tabernacle of David. And with that being said, shalom, shalom, and shalom.